Hi, my name is Aisha Richardson, and welcome to Voices of Change. I have my guest today, Deja Lynn Alvarez, and she is seeking the state representative of the 182nd District. And so I'm really excited to have Deja on the show. She's run for office before, and I'd like to have Deja talk a little bit about herself. Welcome to Voices of Change, Deja.
Hi, Aisha. Thanks for having me.
Sure, sure. So tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're seeking public office.
I let me see. Uh, it's always such a broad question. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. I am, I'm very openly and proudly trans. I work in public health. I am currently the LGBTQ care coordinator for Department of Public Health, and I'm the director of community engagement for World Healthcare Infrastructures. Um, I do a lot of community-based work, um, and a lot of different things, and I think that for me, one of the things that I feel we lack in politics are the voices of the people with actual lived experiences that reflect, um, that reflect the lives of the people that we're chosen to represent. So I think a lot of times people, we have politicians that don't understand what it's like to be part of a system or be discriminated against or to face severe hardships. And um, so for me, as someone has faced all of these things, I've been homeless, I've been hungry, I've had to learn how to survive in the street. Being a transgender woman, I've faced a lot of discrimination and bias, and then surviving all of that to come back and then work inside of those systems and start helping other people that um, are facing those very same things. I have a very good understanding of how those systems operate, um, what our government isn't doing,
Mm-hmm.
and how we need to um, change the way that things are done. And I think we can honestly only do that if we have folks with real lived experience to help um, create and push forth legislation in a way that's going to actually really help people.
I know that you ran for office in the past. You've run for city council, so you have experience seeking political office. And, tell me about what do you think some of the challenges and what are some of the opportunities that you're looking at and what you saw on the campaign trail.
Okay. Um, well, politics is politics can be a very interesting arena.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a lot of who you know, who you don't know. There's a lot of, uh, as there is with every system, there's a lot of uh, bias in politics. That's why we don't have near enough women of color. That's why we don't have near
Mm-hmm.
enough LGBTQ people in politics. That's why, because there is so much built in bias in politics. And so we're all, I am, and many others like Senator Street and other folks that are in there are trying to break those glass ceilings and fill the gaps that are necessary um, for everyone. So I think one of the biggest challenges is the bias. The other challenge is if you are um, someone like me who comes from nothing but has worked her way up to doing the work that I do now, it's very hard to raise money because you
Mm-hmm.
have to raise a lot of money in politics. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
have a whole lot of rich friends. The
Mm-hmm.
people that I associate with are like a lot of the people that are doing similar work that I'm doing, where it's not going to get you wealthy, but you're doing great work.
Right. Right.
So I think that's one of the other challenges in politics is you really have to raise a substantial amount of money in order to have an effective run and campaign. And then there's always these people that are like, oh, we have to change politics. We have to change politics. But then one of the first questions that they ask you is, oh, how much money have you raised so far? Because if you
Yes,
haven't raised a
exactly.
certain amount of money, then they won't see you as a viable candidate. Well, how are we changing politics when we're still looking at people the same way that we always have been? And it's all about how much money you have access to.
Exactly. I think one of the things that have been talked about in the past was trying to figure out how to set aside public money for people to run for politics too, for run for office. And
Yeah.
I think that's a challenging it's an interesting concept, particularly when we shift to folks that don't have a lot of resources, because money and politics sort of go hand in hand, and a lot of folks are self-funding their campaigns. And I mean, that's how we got Donald Trump, right? We got
Mhm.
somebody who had wealth but didn't have experience, right? And so if we can figure out a public option where we're getting candidates that have commitment and connections, and are deeply rooted in the issues that they care about, then we have a better quality of candidate.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Absolutely.
excited about your run, because you are the first trans person who ran for state rep. So this is really exciting, and I think that that is something that should really be highlighted and elevated, because it is it's a great frontier, and you're laying a pathway for folks. And I would say that the kind of work that I do, I would put my foot in the door, shimmy my shoulder in, and then push it in for everybody else. So it's really exciting, and I just wish you so much. um you know um I wish you well in your candidacy. Um, so tell me a little bit more why. I mean, you did talk about why, in terms of like disenfranchisement and the voices. What are some of the things that you feel like you want to work with when you get into office? Because I'm speaking it into being.
Yeah, there we go. See, so we're in some crazy times with the
Yeah.
pandemic and, with the other pandemic known as Trump and his supporters. So I think you have to be ready to change what you may have planned. So, when I ran in 2018, 2019, it was a very different time than it is today. So
Yeah.
for me, one of the biggest things we need to concentrate on is, economic resurgence
Yeah.
post pandemic, especially for small businesses.
Yeah.
A lot of them were hit so hard. So, and this district is, the backbone of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Um, this is where so many businesses are. This is so many people that live here. So, economic recovery has to be on the front line of anything that we're going to go in and do. So, you have to start thinking about, okay, what are some of the ways that we can bring in additional money?
Mhm.
And I happen to be a firm believer in the legalization of cannabis.
Mhm.
And, I know your next guest coming on is one of the people leading that charge, Senator
Yeah.
Sharif Street.
Yeah.
And so I want to, once I'm in office, I want to continue building on the relationships that I have so that I understand everything that's already on the table.
Yeah.
I don't want to get in and recreate the wheel, right? I want to come in and see what other people, which I've already done. I've gone and met with Senator Street around, the legalization of cannabis and other stuff. So, um, finding new revenue streams is
Mhm.
important. Fighting hard for that $7 billion, that rainy day fund that the
Yes.
Republicans are trying to figure out how to siphon off without
Yeah.
um, giving it to the people, and
Yeah.
that money belongs to the people, not to politicians. So,
Mhm.
fighting very hard for that, and then um, I think that we have to take a look at our government is tasked with being responsible to help those in need. And I think that we have to take a real look at how we're doing that. And we have to measure the successes or the failures of the
Hmm.
current systems. And then we have to address those, because these antiquated systems that I have both been in as someone that needed the help of the system, and then now have come back and worked in those systems. I think
Yeah.
that we really need to start addressing, because there's a lot of government waste on these systems.
Hmm.
We're so reactive to things instead of being proactive. So
Yeah.
for me, it's going to be finding new revenue streams, and really working on the governmental systems that are in place, and figuring out, how do we make the necessary changes to help the people that they are supposed to be helping.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that one example is the Department of Human Services and the block grants that come down for the Department of Human Services to be able to support folks who are in crisis, either with cash assistance, food stamps, or SNAP, and if folks if you have instances of child abuse, child abuse. I mean, the Clinton administration changed the rules on how those resources were distributed when they did welfare reform. And I was reading an article about Arizona, and Arizona spends 61% of their DHS money on um, uh, child abuse, and it's an outlier because basically when you apply for TANF, you it's almost a guarantee that you're going to get a child abuse case, and so the that system is penalizing the poor. And so if we could figure out ways to be able to provide services with dignity, and where we're providing resources to help people afford quality housing that's done with dignity. I mean, that is one of the biggest issues I think that but biggest challenges in the city. The rents are going up, and income is stagnant or is below. I think I just read something about the unemployment nationwide for African Americans is 7.5%, whereas every other area it's a lot lower. So I think that we have a lot of work to do to be able to build people's skills up, keep folks from incarceration, which impacts their ability to earn at their skill level. It's a challenge. It's a big challenge.
Yeah, it is. And, one of the other things that I am really big on is, we talk a lot about college degrees. Well,
Yeah,
that's not the only way to make a good living.
exactly.
Like, we need to be putting more resources into, kind of a pipeline from school to good unionized jobs
Yeah,
as well. Like, there's a lot of trades out there that you can learn while you're in school. So you don't necessarily have to take additional schooling once you graduate. You're able
yeah,
to go in, with a union. So I think we need to create more pipelines for that, because I think that helps too. That addresses a lot of the issues.
exactly.
And affordable housing is absolutely something we have to work on. But I think when we talk about affordable housing, a lot of people don't understand what we're saying. A lot of
Hmm.
people think, oh, they just want to give everybody a free house. No,
No.
that's not it. In order, look at it like you're building a house. In order to build a good quality house, you have to have a good foundation.
Right.
And the foundation is having a safe, place to live, a safe, comfortable place to live. So,
Hmm.
I see they're saying for us to take a break.
So we're going to go ahead and take a short break and then come back. And you're listening to Voices of Change with your host, Aisha Richardson, and our guest, Deja Lynn Alvarez.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes. You can do it here. But I get it, you're busy, and busy people can't have prediabetes. I read that wrong. They can, okay? Just go to the site.
Thanks so much. much. Welcome back. So, my name is Aisha Richardson. I'm your host of Voices of Change. This is Deja Alvarez. Deja is seeking elected office in the House of Representatives. So, I'm so excited to have Deja here because one of the things that is really exciting is this issue of redistricting. And it looks like the House is being redistricted to be able to afford some. Advantage for Democrats, which will be a sea change for what's going on in Harrisburg. So, if you wanted to talk a little bit about that, about what it like, how exciting would it be to be in the majority in Harrisburg?
That would be, one of the questions that I always get from people is, you know, Deja, how are you going to handle being in Harrisburg, especially, as the first trans woman? And, it's there's so many things going on and so many hateful people there. And I said, well, you have to remember that my life experience, just as a trans woman, I'm so used to that anyway. And so I'm someone that has broken through a lot of those barriers. Um, so for me, looking at the redistricting and now having an idea in my head that, wow, that us Democrats could end up being in the majority
Yeah,
is a game changer. It's an
yeah.
absolute game changer for getting into, especially for someone like myself who would just be coming into Harrisburg.
Mm-hmm.
With us
Mm-hmm.
having the majority, we would actually be able to get some real stuff done here in Pennsylvania that benefits the people, that benefits the majority, not the select few.
Yeah, and I mean, I think part of that is also the issue of like coming in with your agenda and then just just checking off the things that you can get accomplished, and that to me is also really exciting. So I wanted to just address really quickly. Someone in on Facebook did a message about how they were feeling as a single parent, feeling crunched about the income, their income, and not being able to meet their expenses. And so essentially this issue of inflation, and I myself have issues with making ends meet at the end of the month. You know, the cost of services, gas, groceries is getting higher. And so can you talk a little bit about this issue of like, income equality and what we can do in Harrisburg to be able to address that issue too?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I work 2.5 jobs and I'm
Mm,
campaigning. So
mm,
I absolutely understand what it's like, you know, at the end of the month, you're still scrambling, like, okay, what bills are left to pay? Do I have enough to pay them? Am I going to have to make a choice and pay one this month and pay another one next month? So I get that in a real life way that I'm currently living in.
mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think we do have to, that is one of the things that we have to address is, the price of everything keeps going up,
Right.
but at making a living, the our incomes are not going up at the same rate as inflation or the cost of living.
Right.
So why are we not increasing, like the minimum wage? I mean, we're
Yes.
still, you know what I mean? Where people are talking about $15 an hour,
Right.
and while I love that idea, that honestly still isn't enough.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a single parent, like that one person said, if you're a
Yeah.
single parent, $15 an hour and you're working 40 hours a week, then you have to, who's helping you take care of your child? Then you have
Right.
to take care, you have childcare, you have, provide stuff for school and all
Right.
of these other things. So um I think that's why again, I'm stressing, you know, that it's college degrees are not the only pathway to success.
Exactly.
They're
Exactly.
not. There are many other things people can do. And especially, we have these incredible unions and they can be utilized in such a way if we would just partner with them instead of trying to fight against them fight
Right.
with them, because that's what they're fighting for at the end of the day. Is they're fighting for income equality. They're fighting to make sure that their union members make a living wage and that they can support their families and that they can buy a house and, raise their children comfortably and all of that. So I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done around the partnerships with unions, and I think that's another pathway to income equality.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that like we can talk about that 7 billion in surplus and saying, any state contract you have to pay $15 an hour. Any contract that's coming
Yep.
from the state, and maybe that 7 billion can be used to supplement whatever are is the baseline employment salary. So I think that there are creative ways to do stuff, and it's just so exciting to have a voice like yours, um, you know, being included in that cacophony in
Yeah.
Harrisburg. Um, so one of the other, I see we have a guest who is asking about what your main issue you're going to focus in on.
You okay? Went
Yeah,
down
I
the
got
wrong
one word. I'm
side.
okay.
Um, well, like I said, I think right now the main focus has to be, economic resurgence
Yeah.
after the pandemic. So many people are suffering. So many people lost their jobs or, were out of work for a while. The additional unemployment helped for a little while, but that's over with now. Um, so I think we do have to get smart about the way that we're spending our money. Like our budget is everything. And like you were mentioning, they in Arizona, they spend 60% of that budget for DHS around child abuse. And, it makes me think about, I also work in the nonprofit world, being in the nonprofit world, right? Like they create these grants, and it's the same way with the government. They create these grants, and then they're supposed to be designed to help in the communities that need to help. So rather than supporting programs that are in place or coming up with ways that are really smart and in addressing these things, everybody runs around and applies for the grants and then decides to try and target that group. And I think we do that with government spending. We continue to put money into the um, same systems that we see time and time again that are not working. So it's a waste of money. Like the way that we do housing, the way that we fund homeless shelters and that kind of stuff. That's not helping. We realize that's not helpful. So when are we going to get real about taking a serious look at our budget so that we're not throwing money away and we're really utilizing the money in a way like, let's provide more childcare for single parents, like the person that was on here talking about it. Why aren't we
Right.
putting more money into helping people, especially people that fall in that margin where they're still not financially stable, but they're since they're not homeless and they're not starving, then they can't get any help. So why
Yeah.
don't we target those areas, those gaps where people like this person, they're working, they're trying to make a living, they're trying to support their child. Why aren't we providing services for this person so that they have a little bit of help so that they can continue to grow and continue to build a life for themselves and for their children? And I think that's what we have a whole lot of people that are falling in that gap. Like, okay, if you're homeless, I'll help you. Like in the nonprofit world, there are some grants out there for housing, but you have to be ill. So you have to
Yeah.
have like some type of illness or disease or something in order
Right.
to get help. Why are we setting people up to be in a
Crisis.
position,
Right.
yeah, in crisis in order to receive help? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm a firm believer in having stakeholders sit on funding committees, not just the agencies, but the actual recipients. Because a lot of times when service providers are doing their provision, they have all of these mandates that they have to follow. And from the perspective of a recipient, it doesn't make any sense, right? It is and I'm not going to say overly regulated, but it doesn't keep the consumer in mind. And so when we build in stakeholder committees, when we're looking at service delivery, then it's done with dignity. Like the
Yes.
people who are actually the recipients have a say in how the service provision is done.
Well, and I think it's really important that when we do have committees like that, that those committees really do have a voice.
Yeah.
It's not, oh, look, yeah, we have this committee so that they can talk about their issues, but at the end of the day, we're not going to actually listen to them. And I
Right.
think that's another big problem, is that we oftentimes say, yeah, let's listen to the voice of the people just to make it look good. And then we're still not listening to them. There's still somebody kind of sitting in the top tier making $200,000-300,000 a year. If you're
Right.
making $200,000 and $300,000 a year, how do you know what it's like for the person that is hungry and homeless?
Exactly.
We have too many people making decisions that do not have the lived experience that reflects, the people.
Exactly. Which is why, again, I think that this issue of a like the stakeholder piece that is codified in however the funding is distributed, like the stakeholders and the program recipients have to be involved in how decisions are made, because otherwise a lot of damage and harm can be done. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, there are, and the other thing about, especially programs that deal with poverty or people in crisis, there is a there comes programs along that are wonderful and great, and they really do make a difference in terms of getting people out of poverty or getting people out of crisis, and then they just disappear, like they change from administration to administration. And it would be instead of having just like pilot after pilot, like if we have something that's like proven, and is modified in order to make sure that it, when conditions change, then that program changes. But if we get stuck in the same models, and you know the lives of people in crisis get fluid. And so, but government, has a harder chance, has a is difficult, is very difficult to move. And so that's why I think it's important to have folks who are receiving the services involved in how those services are provided.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. The government, it's it's a beast. It's a beast to get it to move. And it shouldn't shift when a different party is eh, um in power, so
Right.
to speak. So like if and you're right about, like, we need to be measuring. That's why I said earlier about measuring the success and failure rate of the systems that are in place so that
Yeah.
we can address where it's failing at.
Yeah.
I think that another example of that is, how we provide addiction treatment, particularly
Mm.
here in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
It is old, outdated, it's antiquated, it's addiction was different than it is today. And
Right.
we're not truly addressing that in an effective way, yet we are throwing billions of dollars into it. And I wanna see somebody who's showing me the success rate, because I know from working inside
Yeah.
that I see very few successes from the way that they're doing it now.
Hmm.
And so for me, that's just another example of there needs to be more oversight about the money that is spent and these budgets when they're going out. They just keep going to the same organizations or the same places that keep proving to be ineffective over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean that's a whole separate conversation. How addiction services and how funding is spent to support people in their recovery, and the recovery models, the different recovery models. And so that's a whole, actually I'm planning on doing a story. I'm planning on doing a segment about the recovery community, and how what can be done to be able to support those folks that are doing good, and figure out how we can make sure and improve the system. But it looks like we got another break coming up. And then my second guest should be coming on pretty soon. I don't know, Deja, if you want to hang out or if you've got other stuff to do, but you know, the senator should be coming on pretty soon, but we're going to go ahead and take a break. Thanks for
Okay.
listening to Voices of Change.
Once there was a boy who did the same thing again and again. One day, he was told he had autism. He got help and slowly learned how to live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
And we're back. Thank you so much for joining us today. This really bright Saturday morning. I hope everybody, you know, had their snow day and are doing well. We are here with Deja Alvarez, and here is a question for Deja. What office are you running for, and how does someone like myself support your campaign? Because we need more representation of people within our LGBT community in policymaking positions.
Philip, thank you for that question. Absolutely. I'm running for state representative in the 182nd district in Philadelphia, and you can support my campaign. You can go to dejaforpa.com. So DEJAFORPA.com, and that's my website. And you can, you know, we always need money, so donations are a good way. But I also know that people are having hard times right now. So there's also volunteer opportunities, you know, getting help to get the messaging and get the word out there, whether it's door knocking or making phone calls. So if you just go to my website, it has the email address and everything on there, and shoot us an email and I will respond back to you. And then we can have a conversation about what you have the capacity to do in order to help with the campaign. Because that's what it's all about. Without the people backing me, I can't do anything.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's important that we have representation. You know, if we don't have representation, then you know, our voices just are not elevated. And you know, one of the things that's important about, you know, making sure that we are active and engaged is getting registered to vote. You know, the primary is on May 17th,
Yes.
right? That's the primary. And I think that the last day to register to vote is May 2nd. So just make sure that you're registered to vote. And if you need the mail-in ballots, you know, you can get in contact with the city commissioner's office to get your mail-in ballot. You can register to vote at the State Department's website. It's important to, you know, continue to you know, stay engaged and active. So I believe that Senator Street is on. Philip, do we have Senator Street in the let's see.
Good morning,
Okay,
Senator.
so here we go. Thank you so much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good morning. Great. Thank you for joining us today on Voices of Change. So we wanted to welcome you to the show. This is our first show in about a year. And so thank you again for taking the time. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the redistricting, the new maps for the Congressional District, but also the Voting Rights Act. So Deja's here talking a little bit about her campaign, and she just, you know, popped off. Thanks so much to Deja for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having us. And thank you, Deja, for your courage and your interest in public service.
So talk to us a little bit about the redistricting maps, the congressional redistricting maps.
Well, first, I think on a very fundamental level, because we know people come in at different levels, it's important to note that every 10 years we conduct a census. The census requires, and the U.S. Constitution and the Pennsylvania Constitution both require that we then redraw lines for districts. Now, that's congressional districts, that's state Senate districts for folks like me, at state house districts for a seat like Deja's running for, and in local offices, in many cases, that's city council districts or township council districts or school board. If there are districts for school boards, those those can be redrawn as well for those positions, although many of those run at large. The thing that we tend to get the most attention on is the congressional districts because it affects the entire country. And so in Pennsylvania, we previously had 18 congressional members, which are apportioned by population. And after the national census numbers came back, we went from because Pennsylvania's population did not grow as fast as some other states, we're going to go down from having 18 members of Congress represent from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania down to 17. There are other states like Texas and Florida that have increased the amount of congressional members. So we have to redraw the lines, both to make sure so that there are equal populations in each district. And for congressional redistricting, we try and get as close to an exact match as possible. And things to take into consideration are making sure communities of interest can vote, making sure that you don't break up municipalities. But one of the most important things that we have to consider is the voting power of racial, religious, racial, and ethnic minorities, folks like particularly Black and brown folks, because this country has a history of systemic discrimination and disenfranchisement in the drawing of congressional districts, so as to prevent Black and brown folks from having a choice in who they elect. This country, and so the 1968 Voting Rights Act absolutely requires that that if you have a district that's for people of color, that's a majority district of people of color, like a majority Black district, you not reduce that, you maintain that if you can. It requires that if you have a majority minority district that you maintain that as well. And it encourages, though does not require in the same way, that that you create districts where people of color can maximize their influence. That's a more fuzzy term. But for districts that are above, that are majority minority or majority Black or majority Latino, majority Asian, those districts you must maintain. So in the process of drawing these districts, we have to make sure that we not only preserve communities of interest, we look at things like not breaking up school districts, but it is really essential that we maintain the voting rights of people of color. Now, the state legislative maps, for instance, the State House created, and I applaud the Legislative Reapportionment Commission for its work. It created a number of opportunities for new Latino majority districts in the state legislature. At the congressional level, there's not a large enough population to do that in a single place, but there is an opportunity to have a Latino influence / majority minority district in Philadelphia, where we have the second district, and there's an opportunity to have to maintain a majority Black district in the third district. And many have argued there's an opportunity to have minority influence districts other places. And so we're in the process of doing that. Normally what happens is the legislature, it's done through a bill process where a bill can either originate in the House, run through the process, then come to the Senate, where it would go to the State Government Committee, which is one of the committees I chair, and we would have a responsibility for debating, reviewing, and creating a work product that all the committees, members of the State Government Committee would vote on. If it receives a majority vote, it would then be reported to the Senate as a whole. The Republicans are in the majority in the House and Senate, so they control that process. However, Democrats, we do have a Democratic governor who could veto a bill, and there are not enough Republicans to override a veto, so it requires a bipartisan process. Because we're running out of time, and legislation takes long, and a number of factors around the Trump administration did a terrible job getting the census data together, so we got the data late. We may not reach a compromise in time, so we're already in court, and because we must have new congressional districts, and so if we are unable to reach a compromise, we will be in court. And I, along with other Senate Democrats, have petitioned to be interveners, as have Senate Republicans and House and Senate and House members, both Democratic and Senate caucuses, and others. So either way, we're going to have new districts come the beginning of February, and we're going to have new congressional elections.
So it's really exciting that we've got this this issue in the House where the PA House is being redistricted in a way to maybe even have Democratic control. And so that's really exciting too. Is Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, is that
Yeah,
fanciful
so
thinking or?
well, I think some of the reason that the Democrats may take over the PA House has to do with the fact that in the past there's been a lot of Republican gerrymandering, and the second factor is that there's been a lot of Latino growth, and finally, that leader Joanne McClinton did a really great job of making the case for additional House seats because the leaders of all the caucuses, the House Democratic leader, the Senate Democratic leader, the House Republican leader, the Senate Republican leader, all are members of the Legislative Reapportionment Commission, with the Supreme Court selecting a neutral fifth member. And Representative McClinton did an outstanding job, and I'm so proud. She's both a personal friend, and I'm just proud as an African American. She's the first African American to lead any African American woman to lead any of the caucuses, and so it is exciting the work she's done. And I think pointing out the growth of the Latino community, creating more Latino seats, more seats for African Americans, those are things that will ultimately have a great impact, and those are things that could result in a Democratic majority, and hopefully that majority would select her to be the Speaker of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. She'd do an awesome job.
And that's really exciting. I mean, I know that in June, Representative Cruz announced a Latino caucus in the House that would include Representative Danilo Burgos, Representative Manny Guzman, Representative Liz Hambridge from Montgomery County, and Representative Ben Sanchez. And now, if we get Deja Alvarez in, then we have a sixth member of that Latino caucus. And I think that this issue of making sure that we have representation, voices matter, is so important, because I also think that it inspires people to get out and register to vote when they have voices that represent them.
That's absolutely right. One of the things we found is that when communities feel like they have a chance to select people from their own community, or even if they were to select a person from a different community, but they feel like they had a real input in the process, there's a much more voter participation. The other thing that's really interesting is that the policies that get shaped, like where we invest resources in schools, how we spend COVID relief dollars, how we conduct policies around law enforcement, those are impacted by who votes. And so when disenfranchised communities become enfranchised, become engaged in the process, we get a more representative government, and therefore we get a more representative set of rules and laws, and more people feel like they're included in the legislative process.
Yeah, one of the things that Deja was mentioning was about bringing in new sources of revenue, like legalizing cannabis, and figuring out ways to be able to distribute the $7 billion in surplus that's in the state. So she was talking about income inequality and raising the minimum wage, and I think that those are the kinds of conversations that you can have, not in isolation, when you're in the leadership.
Yeah, look, I mean, those are incredibly important conversations. I will tell you this. Pennsylvania has been far too long since Pennsylvania raised the minimum wage. 725 person can work full time on 725 and still not, in fact, be able to take care of his or her family. We must raise the minimum wage. Housing insecurity is such a tremendous thing, and I will tell you, the new form of housing insecurity and the new form of homelessness are people who are couch surfing. They are not sleeping on the streets. They're moving from the house of relatives and friends, place to place. And if we look at what happened with the tragic fire in Fairmount, where 12 people, including 8 children in my district, were killed, that's rough to just say that. The idea that somehow people wanted to live crammed, multiple families in a dwelling unit not intended for that, is disturbing, and really it should really give rise to just how urgent it is that we allocate more resources for affordable housing. We need to make sure that nothing like that ever happens again. And while there are no guarantees in life, we certainly can reduce um, the incentive for people to live stacked on top of one another if there are just more affordable housing opportunities. And that is another public policy thing that the government at the city, state, and federal level can influence. Um, when we look at the violence that occurs in the communities across Philadelphia, the gun violence, that obviously disproportionately impacts some communities more than others. And if you were to move to a Democratic majority in the legislature, if you would have more people of color engaged, then you'd more likely have a focus on the things that reduce gun violence. We are unable to pass even laws like the reporting of lost and stolen handguns, which only serve to stop law enforcement from being able to go after straw purchasers. And I applaud my colleague, Senator Tartaglione, for championing that legislation, my predecessor, Senator Kitchen, for doing the same. It is something we must get done. I'm a co-sponsor. It's common sense, and it doesn't have any effect on lawful gun owners. Yeah, so there's so many common sense things we can do that impact people's quality of life. Healthcare. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I got colleagues who literally who haven't acknowledged that we need to do things like wear masks and provide additional PPE. That people should get vaccinated. There are people who are in elected office in the Commonwealth who don't believe in that. When you gerrymander the districts, and gerrymandering, by the way, is the process of rigging it so that some communities, usually communities of color, sometimes for benefiting one party over another, we disenfranchise people's ability to have their say in the process. When you do that, you get things like a small minority of people, maybe who are like Trumpers, right, will hijack the process and then not allow us to have businesses require vaccines to enter, which make us all safer. And so there's so many things, whether it's healthcare, whether it's housing, whether it's minimum wage, whether it's job creation, those things are all impacted. And yes, legalizing cannabis, I am the prime sponsor of legislation to legalize cannabis in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We waste money on law enforcement. We disproportionately prosecute Black and brown communities. And we are losing out on a huge economic opportunity to be competitive in the market as New York and New Jersey, our neighboring states, move towards legalization. We certainly, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, should legalize the adult recreational use of cannabis, and we should make sure that when we do that, that's a business opportunity for the left out communities, like communities of color, and my legislation certainly advances that.
So, yeah, I mean, I think one of the frustrations is that, Democrats outnumber Republicans in the state by 1,000,000. And so we're lucky in that we're able to have the governor veto legislation that is just egregious, that gets through the House and the Senate. But, we're heading into a new governor's race next year. And, I think that there's a fear that, we're not going to be able to maintain that seat. And I think that the issue of the redistricting and making sure that the people who are voting, their voices are being heard is so critically important, not only because it means that we need to get our people out to vote, but it means that people's actual issues are heard. But we have to take a really quick break. So this is Aisha Richardson, and you're listening to Voices of Change on Usula Media, and I'm here with Senator Sharif Street. We'll be back after this short break.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes. You can do it here. But I get it, you're busy, and busy people can't have prediabetes. I read that wrong. They can, okay. Just go to the site.
And we're back. Thank you so much, Senator Street, for joining us. and right before the break, we were just talking about this issue of representation. And so, I just wanted to commend you for the work that you did around the redistricting on the congressional level. And, just talk to us a little bit about, how important, you know, the fair districts are to our Commonwealth.
Look, I would say fair districts are so important. They are important because if you come from a community like mine that has seen a tremendous rise in gun violence, that has been disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, as we already had higher disparities of health challenges and lower access to healthcare. When you look at how we allocate resources and how we challenge problems, so those decisions are made by the people that we elect, and the process of setting up those districts allows us to have a voice. So in a representative democracy, you cannot have equity, you cannot have fairness if you don't have fair districts. And so it is an incredibly important process, and I am proud to be a part of at least the legislature that's engaged in drawing the congressional districts, and understand how important it is, and whether the courts ultimately make a ruling in that regard. Certainly, we're going to express our opinion and our input. And I think we gotta always remember that any kind of gerrymandering that disenfranchises Republicans or Democrats is bad. In Pennsylvania, we've had gerrymandering disempowering Democrats for decades. So not a lot of Republicans getting disempowered. But the most egregious form of gerrymandering is the gerrymandering that disempowers whole communities of color and ethnic and racial minorities. And so I certainly want to I certainly understand that that's a problem, and want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about it today.
I mean, I think it's really important, because, again, this issue of voting matters, and people vote when they feel their voices are being heard. And again, we have a primary election coming up on May the 17th. The last day to register to vote is May the 2nd. And when you register to vote and when you get out and vote, you tell people what your priorities are. And so it's so important that we have districts that make the priorities of the people who are staying engaged and active can be heard. So, we just want to thank you for coming on and talking to us. Is there anything else that you want to bring up before we end the show? We have about 7 more minutes before we end up. So I'd like to take this opportunity to ask if there's anything that you want to shout out.
Well, look, I want to just shout out all the people who have from Fair Districts who did the Draw the Lines project and who engaged in helping us draw fair districts. I want to shout out the Philadelphia Fire Department for working to to put out that horrible fire that killed 12 people and that put their lives at risk. I want to shout out all of the people who are intervening to stop the gun violence that we're seeing in communities. Folks like the folks that Put It Down, Daryl Schuler, and then a special shout out to Daoud Bey and condolences who recently lost his son to gun violence while he has been championing trying to stop it. I want to shout out the nurses and the doctors who are on the front lines, and the healthcare and the allied and all of the other professionals that work in hospitals that are working to make sure we keep people safe. I talk to the folks at 1199C and PASNAP all the time. They literally go and expose themselves to disease in order to make sure the rest of us can remain healthy. And then the basic city workers who got out and plowed snow. And shoveled to keep our government working. People, when they think about government working, they think about folks like me who are elected, and we certainly have a role to play. But if it isn't for the average men and women who get up and drive a plow or work in a hospital or who put out a fire or who make sure that water continues to run, our government would not work. And the bus drivers who drive our buses, and the supermarket workers who get up to make sure our supermarkets. There's so many ordinary people that do what they can, and those ordinary people need to have a voice in the process. Our government cannot be just about the rich and the powerful. It's got to be for everyday folks. And I think we're moving towards a better society, but our democracy is something we got to keep fighting for.
Yeah, and there are so many programs that are helping people who are in crisis as well. I mean, right now we're in we're in the beginnings of winter, and the Light Heat program is available. That's the low income heating energy assistance program, and you can apply for up to $1,500 to help with your electricity or your gas bill. We were having assistance with rental assistance through the stimulus funds. That has ended. There is no more rental assistance. So please, please, please make sure you pay your rent. We don't want people to be in crisis because they think that the program is going to come and rescue them. So the rental assistance program that had been established through the stimulus funds through the COVID-19 is over, but there are other programs that are available to help folks in crisis. And so, talk to your elected officials about how do you get access to a program that can help you. The other thing is the water department has funding for helping people with their water bills so that they can wash their hands and if they need to shelter in place, or if they Lord forbid do get COVID, that they have running water. So talk to your elected officials about how to get access to programs that you can use to be able to help with your utilities this season. So we're just excited to be able to restart Voices of Change. We've got great shows lined up until April. And if anybody has any show ideas, send them to me, put them in the chat.
Yeah.
Do me a shout out on Facebook as well.
And the final thing, everybody, well, from every community, we need people to get out and vote. We can have all district lines drawn however we want, but people aren't going to have representative government if they don't get out and vote. So we need people to vote. Everybody needs to vote. Es importante que toda la gente vota para sus elecciones. Es importante que toda la gente vota, los morenos y puertorriqueños y europeos, toda la gente vota en elecciones. Is muy importante. So remember, it's important for us to get out and vote. Our vote matters. It impacts and changes and affects the quality of life in our communities.
It does. I mean, I think that it showed in 2020 when folks came out and voted that voting mattered, and we don't want anybody to say that our elections are flawed. Our elections are safe. They are done with dignity. They are done by mostly volunteers or people who spend their time helping to make sure that our democracy works. It does. Again, the last day to register to vote for the May 17th primary election is May 2nd. Votes PA is where you register to vote. If you're not sure that you're registered, you can check your registration status on votespa.com. And again, it is so important to get out and vote because your voice does matter, your vote does matter. And there's an election every 6 months. Every 6 months, not just a presidential election is critical, but every 6 months there's a very important election. And what we're going to be talking about on Voices for Change is we're going to be bringing candidates on to talk about what's important to them because we want to know what's important to you. So thank you so much, Senator Street, for joining us. And again, I want to thank our production crew for making this morning possible. And I'm so glad to be back talking about the issues that are important to the people who I care about. And so thank you again, Senator Street, for joining us.
Thank you, Alicia.
All right. So we're just going to take it out. And thank you so much again. Take care, everybody. Be safe and stay well.